So today we'll be learning our last operation for complex numbers, and that is dividing complex numbers. In order to divide complex numbers, you must multiply by the conjugate. The conjugate will be in the denominator. The expression that's found in the denominator will change the sign in between the two terms. Step 2 will multiply the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate, and so we'll need to make sure we distribute everything there. Step 3 will simplify the powers of I. So anything with I squared or more we'll need to simplify. Normally you'll have I squared, and so we'll change all I squareds to be -1. Step 4 will combine all like terms in both the numerator and the denominator, which means you'll combine all the real numbers and you'll combine all the imaginary numbers. Step 5, our final answer, we'll need to make sure our answer is in the form of A plus BI, the real parts first and then the imaginary. And then of course reduce it if your answer can be done. So on the last slide you heard the word conjugate. Conjugate is only used when you're dividing complex numbers. And so when you're doing the conjugate, you must change the sign between the two terms of the expression. So most of the time when you're looking at these complex expressions that you see here listed below would be representing the denominator. So let's look at the first example, 5 plus 4i. If I'm going to find the complex conjugate, the answer would be 5 minus 4i. So you only change the sign in the middle, but it has to be the sign that's in front of the imaginary piece. So the next one, negative 12i, the conjugate of that will be positive 12i. So again, you just change the sign that's in front of the imaginary piece. This next one, 2i plus 3. It is not in the standard form. However, you still have to pay attention to which part you're changing. So this time you will be changing the 2i. So it will become negative 2i plus 3. Because again, you only change the sign that's in front of the imaginary piece. This last one will just be 10, and it's because it's not an imaginary number. Here is our example, 3 plus 5i over negative 1 plus 2i. So we'll be dividing this complex number. So the first thing we have to do is multiply the numerator and the denominator by the conjugate. Again, you get your conjugate from your denominator. So you'll multiply the top by negative 1 minus 2i and the bottom by negative 1 minus 2i. So you will multiply across. So these two will be multiplied together. So 3 plus 5i times negative 1 minus 2i. So when you multiply that, you distribute. So negative 3, negative 6i, negative 5i, negative 10i squared. So let me clean that up. So it will say negative 3, negative 11i, minus 10i squared. Now remember, I squared must be replaced with a negative 1. So negative 3 minus 11i minus 10 times negative 1. Okay, so that will become negative 3 minus 11i plus 10. So 7 minus 11i. So that's what you get for the numerator. So now let's look at the denominator. So we'll multiply this one as well. So negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Negative 1 times negative 2i is positive 2i. 2i times negative 1 is negative 2i. 2i times negative 2i will be negative 4i squared. So we'll combine like terms. So now we should have 1. This becomes 0. Those cancel out. Minus 4i squared. So don't forget that I squared is a negative 1. So 1 plus 4 equals 5. So we'll take our numerator from our last slide. So it was 7 minus 11i all over 5. We'll separate them to be their own fraction. And now we're done. This is our final answer. Again, make sure that it's in the form standard form a plus bi.